Hey, good evening, everyone, and welcome back to Answers on Eschatology. My name is Dan Derry, and I am the president of the Institute of Fulfilled Eschatology. We are in the midst of a study on Matthew chapter 24, and we are going to begin to look at the Abomination of Desolation in Matthew 24:15. Now, I'll say this from the outset, just like I will say about every event or every prophecy regarding Matthew 24, is that the Abomination of Desolation was fulfilled in the first century generation, and it was a first century event that Jesus' disciples saw, perceived, and understood. Okay? Now, the reason I can take that position confidently, okay, is because, number one, the context and the audience relevance of the context demands it. Number two, Jesus guaranteed it and he promised it in Matthew 24:34. Jesus said, "Verily, verily, I say unto you, this generation will not pass away until all these things are fulfilled." Now, the Abomination of Desolation was part of all these things. Therefore, the Abomination of Desolation must have been fulfilled in the lifetime of his first century generation. And this fits the context perfectly. Jesus told his disciples, whom he was speaking to in those days and at that time, that they would see this Abomination of Desolation standing in the holy place. Listen to the text, Matthew 24:15. "Therefore, when you see the Abomination of Desolation which was spoken through the prophet Daniel stand in the holy place, let the reader understand." Now ask yourself the question, who was Jesus speaking to when he said, "Therefore you will see the Abomination of Desolation"? Not me, not you, unless you were there, unless you lived 2,000 years ago. He told his disciples, listen, the same disciples that he told in verse 4, he said, "See that no one misleads you." The same disciples in verse 6 that he says, "You will hear of wars and rumors of wars." The same disciples that he said in verse 9, that he told in verse 9, that they will deliver you to tribulation. And you will be hated by all nations. See, that's his first century disciples whom he was speaking to. It was to them that he said, "When you see the Abomination of Desolation, spoken of by Daniel, stand in the holy place. Understand." You see, he told them specifically that they would see this Abomination of Desolation. And in verse 34, he guaranteed it. He told them that that generation, their generation, wouldn't pass away. They wouldn't all die before everything he had just said was fulfilled. Powerful. And listen, here's where I want to go in these next videos. This video is simply an introduction to the Abomination of Desolation, and it helps us understand and place the fulfillment of this Abomination of Desolation in the first century. We have to just receive this as the Word of God, not my words as the Word of God, but as the Scriptures as the Word of God, and understand that we don't have to place this in the future. We can be honest to the text. We can be faithful to audience relevance, and we can be good students and have sound exegesis and place this in a first century time frame, just like the context demands. Okay? Now, here's what I want to say as well, which we'll get into in future videos, okay, is that Jesus connects the Abomination of Desolation with the end of the age. Okay, remember, Matthew 24, verse 2 and 3. Jesus prophesies that the temple's coming down. Not one stone will be left upon another, he says. The disciples ask him, "Lord, when will these things be? And what shall be the sign of your coming and the end of the age?" They were asking, and they understood that the destruction of Jerusalem and the destruction of the temple would mean the end of the age, the end of their old covenant age. And they were asking for a sign of the end of the age. Jesus gives the Abomination of Desolation as a sign of the end of the age. Notice in verse 14 and 15, once again, the Abomination of Desolation that Jesus spoke of, he connects it to the end of the age. In verse 14, the verse just before. Let's read the two together. Verse 14, this gospel, the kingdom, shall be preached into all the world as a witness to all the nations, and then the end will come. Same end as Matthew 24:3, the end of the age. Therefore, the next verse is the therefore. It connects to verse 14. Therefore, when you see the abomination of desolation. You see, the Great Commission would be fulfilled. It would be preached into all the world as a witness to all the nations, and then the end will come. Therefore, when you see the abomination of desolation. The abomination of desolation is inseparably linked and connected to the end of the Old Covenant age. It was a sign that the end was near. The Great Commission would have been fulfilled, and therefore, when you see the abomination of desolation, know that the end is near. That's the message. That's what Jesus is telling them. This is the sign he is giving them in response to their question and their desiring of a sign. Okay? The abomination of desolation was a first century sign that the end of the Old Covenant age was near. And Jesus connected it with the fall of Jerusalem and the end of the Old Covenant world in Matthew 24. And here's where we want to go in the next few videos, guys. I want to show you that just like Jesus connected the abomination of desolation, okay, the coming of that desolation, that desolator, with the fall of Jerusalem, so does Daniel the prophet in every single text he speaks of regarding the abomination of desolation, which is exactly what Jesus is drawing from. Matthew 24:15, Jesus said, when you see the abomination of desolation, which was spoken of through Daniel the prophet. In other words, Daniel prophesied of this abomination of desolation. Okay? He prophesied of it in Daniel chapter 9:27, Daniel 11:31, and Daniel 12, verse 11. We're going to look at all these texts, and I'm going to show you that just like Jesus connected the abomination of desolation to the fall of the temple and the destruction of the city, Daniel connects the abomination of desolation to the fall of Jerusalem and the destruction of the city as well. And we'll show you that both Jesus and Daniel place the abomination of desolation at the end of the Old Covenant age at the fall of Jerusalem in AD 70. It's going to be a good study, guys. Looking forward to getting into all this with you. We'll pick it up next time on Answers on Eschatology. Bye for now.